Hello, this is Carsten Ley from Asia PMO. Welcome to our Asia PMO podcast, Transform Your Business. Today, with an amazing guest, Miss Phi from Vietnam Angel Network, the chairwoman of Vietnam Angel Network. And we are happy to speak about post-COVID startup scene in Vietnam. What's going on in the post-COVID startup scene? Miss Phi, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Carsten. Very happy to be on the show. So my full name is Nguyen Phi, and I currently chair the Vietnam Angel Network of angel investors into startups in Vietnam, and also a board director of the ASEAN Angel Alliance Network. And we have up to about 5,000 members across the ASEAN, all investing into startups across the region at the moment.
Okay. So we will probably try to get at the end of the show a tip for a good investment, but let's see if we can get that.
We can get
there. Okay. Good to know. Okay. So let's start with the first question. How is the startup scene in Vietnam and Southeast Asia evolving the last years? So where do you see some trends? Where is it going?
So I probably go back to if you talk about startup, Vietnam only started this whole campaign about being a startup nation about 5 years ago. And so you see the first 3 years of first generation founders, very young, out of universities, not knowing anything much, and not being afraid of anything much because they don't know much to be afraid of. So then you have thousands and thousands of startups being established in Vietnam, but not much are coming out of that. So you see the quantity. But what's happening after COVID, I have to say, is that you start seeing a lot more quality startups out of the pipeline, less in quantity, more in quality. And you also start seeing a lot more mature founders. So what I mean by mature founders would be professionals who have, done 5-10 years in a big corporation somewhere, now starting up. And they know what the market is all about, what the system is all about, and know how to scale their startups using the professional management system. So very different from the first generation of founders who are very young and fearless, but not having enough experience to actually scale their startups. These mature founders are very experienced, very professional. A lot of them are Vietnamese returning from overseas. But I also start seeing quite a few founding group or founders team that is a mix of Vietnamese and foreigners. So that's very interesting to say, because that's where I think ideas and innovation comes from, across mix of perspectives and cultures and approach. And I also see after COVID, quite a few industries have been trending up, and a lot of people are actually looking or focusing onto these industries at the moment. I think food tech. Obviously, we get locked down, so a lot of our food needs to come from packaged food and delivery, last mile delivery, stuff like that. So a lot in food tech, fintech, obviously, because of online payment and digital payment. And recently, Vietnam has been talked about by the international community about blockchain, obviously, because of the gaming industry. So you see a lot of fintech happening. Health tech, obviously, because of the COVID situation, and because of social distancing, a lot on edtech education, and all of those have been existing in the ecosystem before, but post-COVID or during the pandemic and post-pandemic, they have been very much the focus of a lot of angel investors as well as VCs.
It's interesting when you say 5 years ago. That's when I joined Lazada. And Lazada, of course, is not a homegrown startup. It was brought in via Singapore or via Western countries, right? And I also see always a little bit of weakness. I saw them all, what you say, that we had Vietnamese people who tried startup, then we had overseas Vietnamese who tried it alone, who had probably a very high education background and money, but they lacked completely the understanding of Vietnam. Yeah. And then we had foreigners directly trying it, which is also very difficult. And I think you made a very good point that the most successful ones are the ones who have now mixed teams on it, right? Who say, okay, we have in the founder team, people who were born in Vietnam and who know the markets very well and the culture. I mean, Vietnam, 10 years being here a foreigner is still a very special culture to me, right? Getting into it, getting in the understanding, not going so fast on Western trends, maybe like other countries in the regions, right? Having something like Zalo, like a own chat system, which in Germany we use WhatsApp, we only use American system, right? We never had the idea. Vietnam can be very proud of that. So I think that's a very good point, that we have the mixed teams, right? But is also, in the regionally speaking, is the focus still a lot on Ho Chi Minh City now, or are we seeing now more focus, let's say, Da Nang, Hanoi? Do you see also there a development?
It's interesting that you asked that question, because when we started the ecosystem here in Vietnam, it's always been Ho Chi Minh City first, and then Hanoi, and then a little bit of Da Nang along the way. But I think right now, if you talk about the starting point, startups are still very much bootstrapping from where their province or their home province is, but they tend to move into big cities like Ho Chi Minh City, which is a hub of startups of the whole country, because it's easier to access capital, network, people, mentors for support from big cities where a lot is happening. So you see all these startup pitches and networking events and get-togethers and all of that. And you go to one event, you basically get to meet all of the ecosystem stakeholders. So it does make a difference to have your startup based in a big city like Ho Chi Minh City or Hanoi. However, another trend that I start seeing is that a few of the startups are now starting from overseas before they come back and expand in the Vietnamese market. The case of Axie Infinity that just got announced as a third unicorn is such. Because we have more professional and mature founders, they really know where they want to be and what they want to be, when they scale their startup. So they have that strategy at the very beginning of forming the startup together. So some of them even register their startup in Singapore or Hong Kong even before they go to investors and start pitching the first ideas.
Yeah, we also see that. We got lately in touch with KMS Technology, and they told us they build ventures and sub companies, and they are all licensed in the US. And partly the team or investors or even management team is partly in the US, because they are not eyeing to sell anything in the even Asian market. They want to sell on the American market, the technology. So we also see their regional limitless, right? That it's not so focused anymore just to build something up and first roll it out in Vietnam.
Very true.
Yeah. Speaking about COVID, I mean, we always have the impression that startups shouldn't have a problem because they were already agile, they were already work from home, their developers sit around the world in any basement. But do you see things where even startups had to adapt during COVID or struggled during COVID?
Obviously, as you say, they don't have any problems with their working style or being agile, but then they face other problems. Example would be self-sustaining mindset versus burning cash. So startups used to just burn cash, get a lot of cash out of the investors, and you get to burn it, which is a great job to have. But during COVID, investors are very much conscious about cash. So they would like to see that startups setting the first milestones in getting their customers, getting paid, scaling their businesses. So a lot of sustainability is put into focus. And because of that, a lot of the startups even my startups in my portfolio will have to change their approach and think about ways that they can open up new channels of revenue, approach new customers, create new services from their models to be able to gain cash and revenue for their startup, even at the very beginning. Secondly, I think quite a few startups in Vietnam, when they go into the scaling mode, I have to say that they lack the experience of how to scale at the very beginning. And then when COVID hit, is doubling down on the difficulties to scale, because now you can't travel, you can't meet people, you can't make pitches physically, so you have to do everything online. You have to think about new ways of forming partnerships. You probably have to think about new bite-size, customized co-creation programs with your partners. You have to think about new and diverse revenue channels. So you really have to rethink about your model and your business approach. And a lot of the time, a lot about data and customer experience. How do you create experience now that everyone is online or at home instead of being anywhere? I think a bit of that innovation in their scaling approach. And also because COVID hit, scaling is getting more difficult. Business development is a totally new word. The importance of investors become very different. It's not just about financial anymore. It's about their in-kind experiences that they bring to the table. So like their networks, their market experience, their development experience, their on-demand mentorship. There used to be that, and that seems to be, good to have, very value added sort of add on to a financial investor. But during COVID, that becomes the focus, because if you don't know where to go and how to move and how to change and adapt, you probably die before you even get the next bag of cash out of any investor. So the startups really need to adapt to finding investors that are backing them up in terms of business experience.
And we also see that a little bit when we as consultants deal with startups, and especially in like legal and also finance capabilities, they are not very built up yet. Right? That they are lacking talents there. I mean, a lot of startup talents, when they start, they are on the market side, they are on the development side, and probably back office is not that sexy, right? For in the startup world, so nobody wants to be on the back office side. And now you say investors should bring their expertise in there. I mean, does that mean that investors are more and more take the role as controllers, like finance controllers, or like on a board level, or how does that work?
Yeah, I think the board level is the correct word that you just used. They need to be more involved, so being very hands-on in terms of mentoring, in terms of advising. And if like myself, if I need, because I invest into early stage startups, if I see something is really wrong, and if no one in the team is actually fixing it, that I will probably have to lead that particular project as well, just to show people how to do it the professional way, or how to scale it to the next level. So being more hands-on, being more involved as a mentor and an advisor or a board director.
Yeah, and so we need the investors have to be more involved. That's what you say, right? They should be more. Is that possible? I mean, you are an investor and you're in Vietnam, maybe that's easier. But if you are like an American investor, you are 12 hours away, and we see that. I mean, we have also clients like that where we have 11 p.m. calls or 2 a.m. calls. Is that even still feasible in this world, or is it then more also advisable from your side to say, look better for local investors than to go to every Seedrs or any platform to have too many international investors? Is there also a trend, or how do you see that?
I would say for domestic angel investors and VCs, they don't have a problem because they don't have that sort of distance or differences in time zone. But for international VCs and angel investors, it's a different story. So angel investors, they normally invest into syndicate fund, or they can co-invest with a local investor. So that's what we basically promote very strongly across the ASEAN at the moment is I will co-invest with you if you find a startup in Malaysia and I would like to pair up with you to invest. And then there will be two angel investors investing into startup together, one from Vietnam, one from Malaysia, and vice versa. That and also angel syndicate fund. So people put their money together into a fund, and then we will have our local experts to basically go and scan and do the due diligence process, and also to mentor the startups and support startups as needed. For international VCs, in recent years, they don't just find startups and invest financially and let the startups run by themselves anymore. They start investing into accelerators, incubators, support team in Vietnam to be able to support their startups that they have invested in, because they understand that, you know, only with financial support the startups will go nowhere, because they lack a lot of experiences or skills or knowledge about international markets and how to manage and scale their businesses as well. So even though they are international VCs, they always have support programs run by local experts in Vietnam to support.
And we saw the last 3, 4, 5 years, a lot of these accelerators and startup zone networking groups. I don't know. There are a lot of companies coming up, or even organizations which are funded by foreign governments. I see. I know some which are Canadian backed, some which are Israeli backed, and so on. Right. So there are a lot of these accelerators coming in from different countries, also from Asian countries, who help on the ground directly the startups. Yeah,
I have to say, before the pandemic in 2019, I probably received easy anywhere from 2 to 3 delegations, international delegations from different governments in different regions of the world coming to Vietnam, looking at Vietnam as a test bed for their startups, because we have very big population here in Vietnam as a market, and also to put their foot down into Vietnam as the as the first destination to get into the ASEAN. Previously, people would probably very much go to Singapore, but Singapore is becoming very expensive, and Vietnam has a big market as well as lower operational cost. So a lot of the government agencies in the world are looking at Ho Chi Minh City as the local destination for the whole region.
And we see that also because, I mean, in the last 10, 15 years, Vietnam and also the population got more tech affin, right? Before, everybody said you have to try it in Singapore because they know tech. You can test tech there, but it's not true anymore. I mean, also countries like Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia, especially in the cities, are catching up on the tech savviness, and even are having now the developer pool where people are recruited from. Yeah, so
that's correct.
We see a similar trend on that.
Yeah, that's very true.
And speaking about Vietnam, the last question, you already said what are the trends? I mean, edtech, food tech is going very strong. I mean, I'm not still very convinced about food tech, honestly. I mean, not so professionally coming yet to food here in Ho Chi Minh City, honestly. But where do you see more trends for these, when you say governments to come in, or where they are looking at to invest here?
Governments wise, I mean, the government used to play a role of trying to complete the ecosystem. So they not only create policies for the startup ecosystem to work, but also create a lot of platforms and opportunities for the various ecosystem stakeholders to get together and to work with each other. So the first phase of development of the ecosystem in Vietnam was that way. Now it's the second phase, and the second phase is the phase where the government should not be involved too much, but you have to let the private stakeholders actually take the lead, and you need to now complete the ecosystem. So you used to talk about startups, institutions, investors, universities, and all that. But completely missing big corporations and small and medium enterprises in that particular formula. Big corps are still very much away from the ecosystem, and the SMEs have no idea what's going on in the startup world. So right now, I think the government is focusing very much on how to create the merge between the startup ecosystem and the big corporation and SMEs, so that SMEs and big corps can also benefit from the innovation and the new techs coming out of the startups. But at the same time, startups could also find big clients and test beds for their pilots. I think if that happens, that will probably bring a new wave of innovation into Vietnam. But it's happening very slowly, I have to say, Carsten, because big corporations are very slow in integrating, very, very risk averse, and take a lot of time to decide what they want to do next. So it's happening. I can see that a few big corps in Vietnam are already involved in the ecosystem, but very much those that have tech background, those that have traditional industries like FMCG or retail or healthcare are slowly getting into the ecosystem at the moment.
Yeah, fully agree on that. We see that more happening on banking and tech.
Correct.
Not because we are so much into these companies, but we, as consultants, we get asked to help them to build agile centers. So some big bands, even in Hanoi, they are approaching us and say, can you build an agile organization for us? And that's where you see they are getting then open to interact with startups, right? Because they first have to build their own infrastructure there. But it's maybe in tech, maybe a little bit in banking. Yeah. Okay, that was great. Thank you so much for your insights on the Southeast Asian Vietnamese startup scene, and thank you for being on the show.